Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John's reports for the 5th of April. Well, we had the wonderful holiday weekend, and of course, even within that soft period, market still rose off of the highs. We're still in our continuing rising shakeout. We had the gold rising before. Now we're reaching the Azure where this Azure line down here on the shakeout and matching the gold line. That's potentially where we could see some softening if shows up in the indicators. Otherwise, we had almost a positive extreme with the gold right here, which means it was just below that, and that's mostly because of the holidays. So I put a little less on that, but is that low likely to get revisited? Yeah, probably here. We're seeing, DOC red has been rising steadily. We had the crossover right back here at the beginning of the turnaround. And we also had a steel dip to the zero here, which meant that that was a bit more powerful once the orange got under green. And that's allowed for the continuation of it. Right now you have cyan under red, which puts you in that always a buy category. So no changes from any of that. Short-term buyers showing a little weakness here to start off, but nothing dramatic. I mean, we're already still plus 23 already here in the pre-market to begin. NQ you can see is behind the ES as far as the ES making new highs, but it's just slowly working its way back up there. And shakeout not looking, not the shakeout, but the DOC right here, not looking the same where we have cyan under red. You don't see that happening here with the NASDAQ. In fact, you see a separation of the cyan to green and steel crossing below. That could put some stronger downward pressure. We do finally have the shakeout getting to positive from a NASDAQ standpoint, so it's going to be critical that that maintains it. You can see the separation between the Azure and the gold here is a little bit stronger, so it could be a little bit more upside potential for the NASDAQ, even if the S&P starts to fade just a little bit. So coming off that perfect double bottom, another GAM, which is the yellow candles right here off a beautiful DOC setup. The only thing lacking would be the steel coming from underneath for more of a oomph. But it's getting the shakeout to almost above that negative 13.5, which potential could be sustainable from a move. The euro still down at its fledgling bottoms, however, been completely reset. Minus 18 though, still pretty deep. You might need to see an improvement in the shakeout, come back a little bit, and then another pivot, and that's usually where we see our P2 pivots and that kind of setup from there. Intraday. 5K, it started out where we ended up with bullish with the cyan under the red, converted to the green, and then we ended up with a couple of where I'm working with the different magentas within the setup. And the only reason a lot of these triggered was a single same anomaly in each case where we get the brief white pop-up, which is the only justification for that. Because you're already in a DOC spread from earlier, we're just in the continuation move with the white under the 10 level. And so when it popped up just briefly for a moment, that created that. So working with the readings on making that adjustment just created also a separate one. We had talked about the red under the zero level going into a negative number from being an oversold. And I converted that into a buy configuration. So you have the dark one right there, and that will pop up in various, doesn't happen too frequently. So let me just scroll through real quick to find a good one. But it was a way of identifying, and what I found was it usually captured a buy entry slightly before. And some of these other dots represent other configurations that will be adjustments. I've already made a few of them that have reduced the number of magenta candles within. And it creates a nice filtering effect, which ultimately is the idea to show it. So again, you see it'll pop up when we get into these deeper oversold configurations, but also there's a few other criteria that go with it. So I think it was a nice setup, particularly since it tends to show up right before we get the white candle buy setups, or even some of the other ones. What I was really looking at it for is when we get a sell signal that then turns around, and so it would pop up there, and then based off of the ATR stops and everything that I'm working with, it would then create it, and then the next turnaround. And that's eventually going to be how all of that loops together. Within this current setup, let's just go ahead and expand where we're at right here. We've had the trailing off of the MBI readings here as well, but we've been solid cyan under red throughout all of this until this one little brief pop of the cyan was just barely over, but from a steel completely reset, which is why we ended up just popping right back up to the peak. And again, I'll be eliminating this one, so we probably won't see a lot of these magentas that take place like that and then flip around. And there's some other math that'll go into calculating that, but I think that will be a nice addition that will just add to the strength of when they do come in. They're going to be certainly far more powerful than immediately turning around. Even these had multiple bars before they eventually gave that turnaround up signal. So there wasn't anything necessarily wrong with the initial sell in there. It was just the turnaround point where you actually have the white coming back up above had triggered the return move. I'm just going to incorporate it into also the red movements as well, just so that we get a more complete picture, because likely within that scenario, if you wait until red has continued to cross above, there's going to be several other different conditions, but that will eliminate these little momentary blips, which will keep us in trend. Not that the trend moved a whole lot with this, because there wasn't a whole lot of range going on in between there until we finally broke out. Yeah, you do notice that I've marked a few of the positive extremes, beginning at this cycle right here, and then from the beginning one that took place. So that's around 4007, 4015. We just filled the ones that took us all the way back to 4020, which is where that magenta actually took us pretty close to. What was the low on that? Was 21, and right where we're at. So there were several of those in between, but that kind of fills those in, so that makes the 4015, 4007 the more prevalent ones on new cell signal. What you see from some of these other dots is both by configurations in different formats, and then when you get a series of them that all come together, it's sort of like a 1, 2, 3 effect, and makes it easier to see them and identify them and then add them into the code so that we've got them. In this particular case, you get like the dark green bi-configuration there that then leads to the new trend with the stops and everything. So I'm adjusting right now, going through all the different stop parameters, and that will also be a secondary factor in keeping us in some of these other ones, because unless there's a region to violate where they are, there's no reason to get out of the setup. But it's pretty clear, because we talked about this. Under the 10, the white remaining is super bullish. The one little brief pop above. Now we're getting a little bit more of it, but you're getting it within magenta over yellow, or even the orange over the yellow, which orange and magenta are pretty much the same. It's just slightly different factoring on them. And when you're in that configuration with the uptick of blue and green, you are in a bullish mode. So that's where we're at for now, as well as you can see DOC is still cyan under red, so no change there. But you can get a little bit of an alteration when you have steel pop above and then back below, like we're seeing right now. So that could potentially have a little bit of softness if you get a turnaround in the orange and magenta crossing back below, especially now that you made lower pivots and you're at higher prices, or at least equivalently higher highs. That's the long and the short of it. Been a little bit wild there, but also I'll be sending out the update that I've done on some of that language, so that you'll have this most recent version of it. You can do some back testing with that as well if you want. As always, though, on Skype chat, we'll be there. Trade well. We'll talk in there.